Hello and welcome to our fireside chat on data sharing. So today we'll be discussing the safeguarding of our increasingly valuable data in our highly regulated industry amidst the ever-expanding threat landscape and increasing global connectivity. During the chat we're going to cover areas such as why that threat landscape is increasing, why the data is so valuable to us and increasingly valuable, what we're doing and have done to protect it, and some challenges along the way. So firstly, a little bit about myself. So I started my career in automotive control automation. I switched after about 8 years into the city, into the financial sector, into IT, and that saw me go through all of the levels of support, and finally into software deployment across EMEA. Then I pivoted into pharma, and I've been there ever since. And I've covered numerous roles from project engineering, validation, commissioning, quality control, project engineering, and a number of others, and finally settling into OT security some nine years ago. So all three of our panelists are from GSK, and for those that don't know, it's one of the largest pharmaceuticals in the world. And they cover a wide range of areas across the organisation, but I'll let them tell you for themselves. So I'll hand over to Mike. Right.
Hello. So my name is Michael Doran. I am the Senior Director, Cyber Resilience and External Affairs at GSK. Been with GSK since 2020, so going on just a little over 4 years, and spent about 9 to 10 years in cybersecurity, incident response, doing digital forensics, malware investigations, and building up programs for companies worldwide. Prior to that, I actually got my foothold into cybersecurity in the law enforcement area. I spent 9.5 years as a law enforcement officer, the last 3.5 doing digital forensics for the entire city that I was a police officer at. So since coming to GSK, I handle their cyber resilience, tabletop exercises, both from a programmatic and a technological perspective, as well as helping the individual BUs, OT, as you'll hear today, really come to the forefront, to the upper quartile of incident response and cyber resilience in the industry. So happy to be here, happy to be a part of the panel, and I'll pass it over to Andrew.
Hi there, I'm Andrew Brockington. I've worked for GSK for a number of years in many roles. I started in IT support within our R&D section and moved through into service management in our finance organisation. And a number of moves later, I find myself in the security organisation aligned to OT. And I'm actually a business partner that is aligned to the global supply chain organisation. So trying to translate what security want from an OT security viewpoint into what the business actually need. But yeah, so onto our discussion, and Dan, we're talking about data and regulated data. Why is that so important for us as a pharmaceutical company?
Very good question. And obviously as a regulated industry where we've got regulatory compliance and always have done in the pharmaceutical industry, and that's increasingly rigorous. Only recently they introduced serialization, which was an additional level of, I guess, authentication and governance, and that was put in place to address counterfeiting, supply, patient safety, etc. It means that our products have to be coded and with a serial number, and every drug that we supply has to be traceable all the way back to the exact batch and where it was produced, and so therefore protecting, removing the opportunity for counterfeit and also protecting the patient. But that's just one area, of course. Our regulators, the FDA, the MHRA, the EMA, we have regulators all over the world that we have to demonstrate that we have produced our drugs in a controlled fashion, the validated processes, and that's really just to ensure the safety, efficacy and quality of the drugs that we deliver to the patients wherever they are in the world. You've got patient safety records in our clinical trials. We've got our own employees, of course, which numbers 70-odd thousand. So it's all data that we need to protect, and we're increasingly producing it. And lastly, but not least, there are other areas of data, but probably what to focus on today is the manufacturing process data, which is probably the biggest area of growth. And of course, we're looking to pull as much of our data from our lower levels into data lakes and enable some sophisticated analysis of that data to try and extract ever more value from that data, whether it's in the development stage to produce ever more complex and sophisticated drugs that are perhaps even personalized right down to the individual, or whether it's to improve our OEE, our efficiency, our operational efficiency. So there's a number of reasons and areas where we're producing data, and we're just continually producing more of it. And of course, it's all value to someone. So there's always somebody that would benefit from gaining access to that data, and it only adds to that threat landscape, which is probably where I should hand over to Mike to talk more about that growing threat landscape.
Yeah, so part of what my team does is analyze threat intelligence feeds, bring them into the fold, into the environment, so we tune our tools based off of those threats, be it indicators of compromise, file hashes, et cetera. And we actually tune the tools, we tune our incident responders based off of those threats, and ultimately we put that forth into our tabletop exercises, our programmatic approach to training our individuals, both at the incident response level all the way up into the business level, the C-suite. But from the threat landscape, it's a dirty element. So by the time I finish this talk today, more threats will be surfacing, amplification of current methodologies will be there. So it's really, the good guys can't really get a foothold to get ahead of the threat actors. And with the implementation or the use of AI, that is going at a hyperspeed level now, to where attackers are actually leveraging AI to build complex pieces of malware to get into ICS, PLCs, OT environments at a quick pace to where incident responders cannot keep up with that. So from the threat landscape, what we're seeing is the geopolitical side of things, as wars and conflicts break out between countries. Using cyber warfare is becoming the new norm, taking out industrial control systems, implementing taking out critical infrastructure, and that's one of the biggest things, at least for GSK, that we're really worried about, is falling into that critical infrastructure and having attackers come after us as far as from a manufacturing. When COVID first hit, we were at the forefront of COVID research and things like that, and there was that honor amongst the attackers at the onset of COVID where they said, let's leave everybody on the forefront alone that is doing research into the COVID vaccine, and that lasted all of about a couple of months. And then they went after everybody for research and development data and things like that. So threat landscape is always expanding. Ransomware, which my team handles, ransomware response, is never going away. The implementation of AI is only going to speed that up. Ransomware threat actors are now getting to the point where, yeah, the ransom demands are good, but now they're getting into the hacktivist activities where they're destroying infrastructures, OT environments, just because they have an agenda or a motive to do so. Not so much for money, but just because they don't like the particular process. So we take all that information in, analyze it, build our threat briefings, inform our senior leadership, our incident response personnel, so that we're better at the forefront. And again, you'll hear me say it throughout the talk, to get to that upper quartile of where we needed to be from a strategic perspective in our cybersecurity. So, but I talked about the threat landscape and certainly how it impacts both the IT and the OT space. But Andrew, I'm kind of curious, knowing what you know and how you've worked on at GSK, what can organizations do to kind of build up their OT program to go against some of these threats?
Exactly. Thanks, Mike. So we started an OT program, security program, a number of years ago now. And that comprised of the central cybersecurity office team and members of our automation team as well. It focuses on all areas that we use OT, but I'm just going to stick to the supply chain side of things because that's what I'm aligned to. So we followed the NIST framework as the kind of bedrock of that program. And the idea was to develop a set of OT standards that we could implement across our OT landscape. we have obviously a set of IT standards, but obviously we need to change those into the OT ones. So a team was built to do that. Not just to build the OT standards, but to understand how we can build the training and awareness for the engineering side, and also the tech side as well that are supporting some of those systems too. Actually, I see Peter in the audience here, and I really liked a line that you said yesterday in your talk, which was minimize business risk with a security lens. And I think that's the approach that we've really tried to take, is not just to deploy to reduce security risk, but to try and get that holistic view of where we are. So what did that look like in progress? You've got a set of standards, that's great. What do you do with them? So teamed with our engineering folks, we actually got, or they went ahead and built the specific SOPs that supported those standards, more technical standards that went into in-depth baselining, for example, of particular types of OT equipment, guidelines as well for how people should use particular tools. And this really helped us on a number of fronts, but mainly to get continuity of deployment of those standards across the board. So I think that was a real, I think, Dan, you're going to talk more about the stakeholder management in a bit and how you need to get those on, but I think that's a key element of the success that we've seen in doing that, by ensuring that we have those engineers on board in the first place. So I'm just going to focus on a couple of areas of what those standards focused on, and the main pillar really was how we dealt with our networks. So on two fronts really, network separation and then segmentation, which I think is the key risk reduction step that we took. Ensuring we were protecting our endpoints as best as possible. I think we all know, if we work in OT environments, that we will have weak assets out there that maybe can't take AV, so how do we build endpoint protections that can protect those as much as possible? Ensuring that we could educate our users around the use of USBs, for example, that are still very prevalent within the ICS OT environment. So building that almost environmental health and safety mindset into the cybersecurity space with regards to how you use USBs, etc. And then another space which is interesting is the IDAM space. So how do we get that authentication, segmentation, for want of a better phrase, into the mindset and the practicalities of the OT environment, knowing that there is a data element to that as well. So within the GXP world, we've got the Alcoa, so you've got to make sure that all of your data is attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original and accurate. So there's another acronym, if you didn't know that, to note down. But a key area of access management is that attributable one. So making sure that we could use technology within that space to ensure that we could tick off one of those really important aspects of GXP. So that's just a whistle-top tour of some of the things we did within our environment. But Mike, we've got these tools in IT, we've got these standards and tools that we've rolled out in IT. Can you give us a flavour of how we've tried to bring those two together from a sort of central CISO point of view?
Yep. No, thanks, Andrew. So when I came to GSK, we were very much, you have the IT and the OT space, very diverged, very different. So we were kind of siloed off. And leadership came in and said, well, why can't we, for lack of better terms, play well in the same sandbox together? So we went on a comprehensive strategic approach to figure out what ways could we come together under common ground to protect not only the assets, the environments, but also our patients and our people, and find ways to do that. One of the biggest ways that we did was we have representation from OT that come to the various IT element meetings and projects. They're actively involved, so they know what we're doing and they can offer their input into, hey, is this going to impact OT? If so, here's what you might want to do. Conversely, we have somebody from IT sitting on the various committees and boards within OT to keep them abreast of what IT is doing, but also to, to make sure that they're addressing the same elements on the same front. Recently, my team has started doing, and I mention it all the time with the tabletop exercises, they're not just IT focused anymore, right? Because there are a lot of threats to OT. So what my team has done is begun working with the OT sites and the leads and actually doing functional tabletop exercises with those specific groups. They're all tailored. We spend about 3 to 4 months building out each one of these exercises, but they are tailored and they are built on real life threats, real life scenarios, real life infrastructure makeup at the various sites. So at the end of the day, when the teams go through the exercises, it's as real as it can be without it actually being real. And that has helped bring the teams together. It's helped close, not only identify, but close a lot of the gaps in procedures, in policies, tool sets, and the like. Another thing that we did comprehensively was, especially, some companies do it, we were big into it. We had a lot of tech, and we didn't need a lot of the tech that we had purchased. So we went by and we went down a comprehensive approach where we went through each tool, mapped it to what its capabilities were, and weeded out those tools that we did no longer need. And then that shortened or condensed the threat field, right? Because the more tools that you have in the environment, the more opportunities for a threat actor to exploit them. And that's really kind of helped us shape sort of the protection of the IT environment, but also within the OT side of the house as well. They've sort of mirrored the way they have approached things, to include some of their response plans. Because at the end of the day, we all got to work from the same pane of glass, same foundation. Now, some of the little minute details from the response side is going to be a little bit different because you're dealing with ICS systems as opposed to IT systems. But foundationally, we're on the same page as far as what we need to do, who to contact. I mean, that's routinely practiced. So I always like to say it's like a well-oiled machine. No matter what the threat is, no matter what the incident is going to be, everybody knows their part, everybody knows who to contact, what plan to work through, and it's just repetitive. I spend a lot of time updating plans and procedures with the hope, I don't see anything wood related in here, but with the hope that I'll never have to use them in the coming weeks and months and years. So I think we've done a phenomenal job in taking it to the level it is today, and people feel confident not only at GSK, but I think in our peer environment that we're reaching to that upper quartile of where we need to be. So, but when you build these programs individually, IT and individually OT, and you kind of merge them together, Andrew kind of touched on it, but it takes a lot of support, both on the foundational level, which is the incident responders and the tacticians, but also a lot of stakeholder management, a lot of senior level support. So, Dan, if you want to kind of walk us through, how were we successful in gaining that stakeholder management, stakeholder support in building the individual programs, but also aligning them under the same common ground, same mission?
Yeah, we recognized early on that engaging the senior leadership and getting their buy-in was going to be instrumental in the success. So we started by really going right to the top and articulating the risk in a common language, in a language that they could understand. So not just talking obviously in technical terms, using all the cyber jargon, but talking in terms of business loss and the threat to their business, the threat to their supply chain. So put it into a language they could understand, but also where there was opportunities to actually even achieve a payback. So Andrew mentioned it earlier on with IDAM. So the identity and access management suite of tools actually deliver value for the business. They deliver speed, efficiencies, man hours, or person hours savings, and data integrity advances. So you've got audit trails. So all of those tools actually deliver, especially in our business, deliver value for our core business. So there was a good payback there. So they recognized that. And so early on, we got very good sponsorship. They recognized the size of the risk, and that was important that in position it against all of their other risks. Ultimately, that's what the board are there to do. They've got a whole bunch of risks apart from producing whatever it is that we produce. They've got to manage that against the ever-present risks and prioritise those risks and afford those risks the appropriate monies and support to address them and mitigate them. And so we got a considerable support at the time. So that was the top-down approach, and then we went from the bottom up as well. So we knew that that message would be coming through the management hierarchy, but then we went directly to sites, and we established ambassadors at the sites, and we built a team, a community of practice amongst all of the people that were actually in the operating technology space. I'm specifically referring now to the manufacturing, but it's true of all of the business units. But within the manufacturing space, going to the plants and working directly with the automation and engineering teams, the people who understand how the stuff works, and working, and then so that they appreciate the reason that they have to do, implement the tools and processes that we're asking them to. So, yeah, so it was a long journey, and it's well established now. I think we're, as Mike alluded to, we're in sustain mode, and but we don't take the foot off the gas. And I think there's going back to another great Alice in Wonderland image that somebody shared yesterday, was that where I think the Queen says that you can't to stay where you are, you have to run, and to make progress you need to run twice as fast as that. And that's kind of the space we're in. So we can't take our foot off the gas, and we've got a solid foundation, and we'll keep working at it. So that's really just it's an overview of our program. I thought we would leave some time to open up questions to the floor, if there are any questions about what we've said so far.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. A very good presentation, and thank you for sharing this with us. This is a question for Michael. Maybe it's a silly question, but how do you measure this tabletop program in terms of success in order to tell the C-level that this we nail it, So.
Yeah, so the way I run the program or designed it was we work on a 2 times a year basis for the exercises for the BUs. Now, GSK is a large organization, so scheduling is quite complex. But normally what I recommend and what I try to structure in is a tabletop in the spring, but also in the fall. And what I do is I do an after-action review report after that one in the spring, address any deficiencies or gaps or shortcomings, and allow the teams to roadmap those items, and then we work on that in the fall. Now, some of the items maybe take 6 months to a year to implement. Others can be quick fixes, maybe they need an update to the BCP plan or incident response plan. But then in the fall, the scenario is built, and I ask probing questions, if you will, alluding to the AAR to see if they have actually brought forth and made the necessary corrections. And that's all tracked and logged within our program so that people can actually see the progression and the maturity as they continue to do the exercises. Now, one of the new things that we're doing this year is it's a combination of the BCP, DRP, RPO, RTO type thing. So in the spring, functional tabletop, where we pick a critical application, target it, and then have the teams articulate in a verbal fashion, well, we could have this restored per our BCP or our DRP in X amount of time. Great, that's notated. Then in the fall, we take the same scenario, same application. Now teams are going to be expected to do a full recovery of said application. And then that's married to, it's not a gotcha exercise, but ultimately at the end of the day, my job is to make sure that senior leaders, when they go on up to our global leadership team, that if they say they can have something restored in 2 to 4 days, it's got to be backed by test and by paper. One of the sad truths is you can say anything you want on paper. I can have it done in 4 hours, but until you actually functionally do it, you don't know. So long story short, it is tracked and measured, and teams can actually see the maturity over the years and increasing complexity of the scenario itself. So yeah, very good question. Very good question.
Thanks to all three of you. Really great talk, and obviously a great program that's been developed and matured over time. My question is related to that kind of ICS OT environment there. I think most industrial organisations have that inertia, the leave it alone, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. And especially in pharmaceutical, you guys would have kind of GAMP processes or something like that, which obviously conflict with the desire to have better security and not just robustness, but resilience, right, to your title. How have you kind of faced that challenge and achieved some success in that, or is that still a bit of work in progress?
I think it's always work in progress because you never stand still, right? What is in service now will be out of service in a few years' time, and you'll have to then support that asset which is, no longer getting patches or whatever it might be. So I think it's an ongoing thing, but I think for us the core element is the separation, segmentation as the main risk reduction for that. But yeah, in all of the domain areas, it's a case-by-case basis, and I think it goes back to the management and those ambassadorial roles that we have at site, making sure that they have some kind of cyber training, so whether that's a SANS for 10 to really understand exactly what cybersecurity means for that particular asset. And then, we can bespoke build those controls for that particular asset based on, back to your point, Peter, the business risk, right? How risky is that for our business, and what security lens can we look through to apply compensating controls to it?
And can I add, and trying to link to two pieces. One was the stakeholder management. I attend a lot of meetings where I have to share, as Mike was saying, share those updates, reports on performance of our OT security posture. So that's another reason that it's always ever present in everyone's mind, because it's being reported at every level, at every meeting. And that means that when we send a request, a mandatory order to patch or to do something, then it gets that, and it gets scheduled. But we don't get pushback. I mean, obviously, as you allude to, it's sometimes these lines run 24/7, so we have to wait for the next shutdown. But we have in the past, if it's serious enough, we will stop production. It's all relative and proportional to the risk. And having engaged the sites and got them on board, that they understand how to appropriately position it against all of the other things that they have to manage in their day-to-day processes. It's a good question.
And to add on to what Andrew and Dan were saying, cybersecurity, at GSK you're always viewed as the blocker. The people who tell me, no, I can't do this because of this. And I think that's where, there's some systems within OT you physically cannot update, because it'll break the line. So I think that's where the education piece comes in, and us attending meetings. Now it's not, we're met with, IT is saying we need to update this system because, it's a hindrance. But now let's work together and figure out what are our options here to update this to make it more secure, and that's where the segmentation came in. So it's always a continuous work in progress, but we are leaps and bounds for where we once were.
Yeah, security is a journey, not a destination, right? I think again, like any patch in OT, and especially for yours, is a self-initiated denial of service, right? By definition, and so managing that with that enabling approach, not a disabling approach. I love that strategy. A lot of the things you've been talking about, I would say, speak to more robustness than resilience, right? That likelihood reduction part of the risk equation, not the consequence. Right, for me, that's that difference between robust and resilience, that it's not just unlikely to fail, but if it does, then how do we recover? You talked about tabletops. Again, NIST, even as most standards are quite underdeveloped on the right-hand side of the bow tie, on the consequence side. How are you thinking about that consequence piece of risk management, and again, speaking back into that resilience side?
So as far as like the consequence of not patching.
Yeah, so for me, it's less about the patch and more about the how the system is vulnerable, right? That's that uniqueness of OT.
Yep.
And obviously we want to reduce the likelihood of compromise and of being impacted, and right, that's where you start with an OT security program, is trying to do that segmentation, segregation, patch, et cetera, to reduce likelihood. But to achieve resilience, you can't just have robustness, which is likelihood. You need to have the consequence side. So if those protect, prevent controls fail, right, because we're NIST, the detect, respond, and recover piece, are you finding more investment there? Have you got some gaps? Is that kind of on the roadmap, or it's, but again, bit of work in progress?
No, it's always a continuous maturity journey for us, and you talk about the risk or the outcome, right? And that's where I keep going back to the education piece, is because our threat intelligence team, they don't just center on IT. So they do constant threat feeds and updates and reports, not just only on the vulnerabilities and the insecurities of systems within IT, but they spread the love and go into the OT space as well. So they're constantly educating on what those risks were. And then we actually pair that up with the business side of the house, which is if this happened at one of our sites, financially, reputationally, legally, what are our outcomes of this? And all of that information I do with the exercises. So all the exercises are built to where it's going to amplify and show, hey, if this line went down, or if this particular system went down, here's the risk, here's what we lose financially, reputationally, and this is what the impact is to the company. And I think based off of those outcomes, we do make movements, albeit sometimes small, in our strategic maturity journey. But we are, like I said, leaps and bounds from when I first started in 2020. Yeah.
I think unfortunately we're out of time now, but we'll certainly catch up after, Peter. So if there are any more questions, feel free to reach out. So thank you, everyone.